There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Good morning, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am outside in one of my favorite parks for the first time this year. I tried to film here maybe 3 weeks ago, and the cicadas were just the drone of the cicadas, you wouldn't have been able to hear me. So I don't hear any. That's a bird. That's fine. We can deal with birds. It's 7 o'clock Friday morning, and it's still almost too hot to be out here. I don't know what the temperature is. It might be 28, but here I am. Yeah, I've been busy this week. I've been busy bailing. I've been busy reading. I've been busy causing all manner of commotion. So I got lots to tell you. Yeah, I didn't get very far with the discomfort of evening oh dear, I studied the pronunciation. I don't think I've got it. Mareke Lucas Rijnsveld. I think that's kind of almost right. I didn't have a strong negative reaction to it, other than that I don't remember now, fair ways into it, at least 20%, maybe 30%. And it's a very sad story, family tragedy. Focused on a family and how they did or did not deal with their grief over the death of a son by drowning. That happened in chapter 1. That's not a spoiler. And I didn't feel anything. So while the writing was interesting, the characters were quirky, and there was a lot going on, none of it kind of made sense to me emotionally. So if I'm not connecting with a story emotionally, especially when it's a very emotional a story about grief, and I'm not connecting emotionally, auto-bail people. So that didn't go very far. This is a real Marmite book. It won the something or other. The Union Nationale, the Nobel something. Didn't deserve it as far as I'm concerned. Lots of other people thought so. Not me. But I didn't, I wasn't feeling, some people objected to, there was gross parts. Maybe I didn't get to the gross parts, but the stuff that was a little bit odd and perhaps disgusting to some readers was the only part that was interesting for me. But in a story about a young man drowning and then the family dealing with it or not dealing with it, I should have been emotionally engaged, and I never was. So it failed utterly on that point alone. So that was my bike book. So I replaced it with a new title from Dean Street Press's Furrowed Middlebrow. Hannah, if you're watching, I haven't got to answering comments. I'm about a month behind answering comments, and that started during the beginning of coronavirus, and I've never been able to catch up. One day, I'll just put in a concerted effort and get caught up, because I don't like answering comments a month later, because a lot of them are, people don't care what I have to say a month later, but I just haven't been able to get caught up. Anyway, so Hannah, I haven't answered your question about Furrowed Brow. Hannah thought it was an odd name. It's Furrowed Middlebrow. Maybe I misspoke, which is actually quite a clever title for an imprint of women's fiction from the 1930s to the 50s or something. Much Dithering by Dorothy Lambert. I mean, the title alone, it was an auto-buy, and the cover is quite fabulous too. Dorothy Lambert was a little-known Irish writer born 1884 in County Cork. She did not start writing until she was 43 and wrote 27 novels before she died at about the age of 80-something in 1967. Well, unfortunately, I can see why she was little known. She's not that great of a writer. However, this was a really difficult one to bail on, so I can hear people screaming at their TV, well, why the hell did you bail then? Well, I bailed. What I liked about it was it had a lot of energy from the first page. I was smiling, almost chortling early, about a scheming widow who wants to remarry for money, and her main competitor is her recently widowed young daughter, and she doesn't want her daughter to tell anybody that that man just took his shirt off. Don't see that in Japan very often. That is probably the outside of some kind of an outdoor swimming pool or something like that, that is probably the third shirtless man I have seen in Tokyo in 11 years. It's rather nice to watch. So apologies for my wandering eyes. I keep talking about this book. He was doing warm-ups. It's really hot to be doing stretching and stuff. I don't know if he's a jogger or what he is, and looks cute and maybe young. I can't tell. It's far away. And now he's at the drinking fountain and washing his body. Maybe he's finished. Maybe that was his post-jogging stretching, because he's now completely got his shirtless body all wet and he's drying himself off. Oh my. I sure picked a fine time to come to this park, hey? Anyway, So it was funny, it had a real energy to it, and it's set in the town of Much Dithering, and there's a sister town called what? Oh, and that gold-digging older widow is Ermintrude. I'll spell it on top. I mean, just the name cracks me up. And, Little Dithering. So Little Dithering and Much Dithering. It just cracks me up. But it just was not good enough to finish. I got about 40% of the way through it, and the characters were nothing more than caricatures, and that just doesn't hold my interest. So there was no character development. She had exactly one idea about each character, and that just drives me crazy in fiction of any era. And there was very little in the way of scene. Way too much exposition, and then this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and what scenes were there were pretty good. I do not care about a story in fiction if the characters are paper thin, and that's what happened. So I didn't dither with this one. Look at that cover. Best title ever. Somebody should just rewrite this novel. Oh, there he goes. Coffee Thursday. See my Friday reads of a couple weeks ago if you have no idea what I'm talking about. I think Coffee Friday's in the title. I won't explain it again. At least not for another year. And finally, and I was quite sad about this one, but I feel fully justified in bailing on after reading this extremely episodically since June, I believe. We're now in early September, so I think I started it in June for Caribathon. Small Island by Andrea Levy. It's I don't know if it's a BookTube darling, because BookTube wasn't really around when it was published, but lots of people loved it. It's highly likely that the fact that I was only occasionally dipping into it over 3 months was part of the problem, and that's fine. I don't care. But I don't think it was just that. I never really liked the writing. And, I mean, I didn't hate it enough to bail early, but I know I was never really drawn into the story. And it was just excessive. It was just way too much story, way too much background stuff. I got halfway before I bailed, yesterday or the day before. Suddenly a breeze has come up. Maybe it's okay. I got halfway, and then she started another character's backstory. The novel was half through, and I was going to have to go through another 100 pages of another character that I thought was just an incidental character, and no, this was another major character that I was going to have to spend 100 or 150 more pages getting to know before this story set in the present of the novel was going to be stretched further, and I just said no. I don't care. I don't care. So, bailed. So getting back to the fact that as a slow reader, and this was one that was always getting pushed back because it wasn't for a buddy read, and I didn't care about the Caribathon timeline. So, sometimes it was once every 2 weeks I'd read. But recently it became my backup on the exercise bike. So I was dipping into it every day, and I was starting to make more progress. But I realized once I started to read it regularly that I never really cared about any of these people or what was happening. Nothing really sucked me in, and the writing wasn't very good for me. So it wasn't an awful book. I may have not done it justice by reading it so episodically for the first couple months, but I don't care, because so many books benefit from my slow reading that occasionally one doesn't, or one gets pushed aside. I mean, it's just the cost of doing business, is that right? No, that's not a very good expression. It's just, you win some, you lose some. So I got some raised eyebrows when I bailed, and now you know my story. You can judge it as you see fit. So those were my bails. I have not finished any, I had one or two, one being Breasts and Eggs by Kawakami Miyako, that I could have pushed, and I considered pushing myself to get the last 100 pages read yesterday, but that book and many other books I'm currently reading, they're just resisting me pushing myself to finish, which is what I love about the fact that it usually takes me weeks and weeks and weeks, if not months and months, to finish books. Most of the books I read, they totally resist rushing through them. I expect I'll have a lot of things finished by next week. I'm not promising anything, but I expect that I will. Certainly the Shugi Bane buddy read will be finished early next week. But sometimes I come to a Friday reads and I haven't finished anything, but here's all my bales and the books I've started. So that being said, here's what I've started. I've started 4, I think. So in fact, I'm now reading 20 books again at one time. It's too much, so I'm going to try to get it down 15, 12 is my sweet spot. 15's okay, but anything more than 15, and it's a little ridiculous. I don't count books where I'm doing one story or one chapter a week as a buddy read, because that takes so little time out of my reading schedule that it's really, and how many of these would be like that? A Fanatic Heart, the Edna O'Brien short story collection with a buddy read with Sunya of an enthusiastic reader. That's one story a week on Sunday, so that I don't even think of that as kind of what I'm reading other than just once a week. And same with the short story anthology Everyday People, an anthology of stories by writers of color that I'm buddy reading with Heidi of My Reading Life, one story a week. And now a new buddy read with Joe. And the Korean anthology with Britta. So all of those, that's 4. So really, that's 30 minutes of reading each per book per week, plus checking in and voxering back and forth. I don't really count that in my head, so it's 16. So if I can get it down to 12, plus those buddy reads that aren't taking a lot of time each week, I'll be fine. Just so you know. So what have I started? There's one cicada. I have started Elizabeth Jane Howard's The Long View. This was a 1956 novel, and this is a buddy read with Leah from Calgary. This is fascinating, and the writing is gorgeous. What elegant prose. It's just a family story. The son is getting married, and there's a dinner party. It opens with the dinner party, and then it kind of introduces each character as leading up to the same dinner party, and then the fallout from the dinner party. And by the time all of that is narrated in about 20 pages or something, I was hooked. The coldness, there's a brutality, an emotional brutality that is so subtly expressed. And if there was no kindness, there was no vulnerability in any of the characters, I wouldn't be interested. It would leave me cold, but there is, in some of the female characters at least, they're sympathetic and very complex. But the head of the family, the father, what an asshole. He is ruthlessly, emotionally brutal in such a complex way, and the way that it's conveyed, the way he destroys people at the dinner table, at this dinner party, with a cutting remark that if Elizabeth Jane Howard wasn't expressing all the things going on alongside, beneath, and preceding that cutting remark, you wouldn't even notice it. But the way it's set up, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that to her. His future daughter-in-law just destroyed her. But yet it doesn't sound, if you isolate the comment, I don't even remember the comment. I think she was talking about she loved French movies, and this is his son's fiance, and I think it's their first meeting, the father and the future father-in-law, and she is really nervous and unsure of herself, and she's talking too much, and she's saying, I love French movies, and he just looks at her and goes, oh really? Why? And she just about has a mental breakdown at the dinner table because she doesn't know why, and it just heart breaks for her, and he was such a jerk, and I am not representing it with the subtle complexity with which Howard tells the story. It's just devastating. I love this. And last week I bailed. What did I bail on? My buddy read with Joe Smith. Oh, the Benjamin Myers book, whatever that was called. So Joe is on a book buying ban, and so I said, send me a photo of any short novels or anything, short story collections you've got on your shelf, and I will get it or see if I have. I hope it's not too noisy, people. I thought they were done. So I looked at the stack of books she had. One of them I had on Scribd, and it's like a 100-page ebook. It's a novel. I was interested in the writer, John Fosse, a Norwegian novelist, especially after Ronan Hession talked about his septology. There's one and two books in that series. This is Alice at the Fire by John Fosse, translated by Damien Searles. And we're doing this 100-page novella over 4 weeks, so 20 pages a week. So I don't have much to tell you, but it's very experimental. There is a kind of pointillistic, I keep using that word, I'm not sure I know what it means, but I'm just going to use it and try to sound like I know what it means. Character to the prose, and it's about a woman who's, I can't yet decide, I can't tell yet if she has come back to visit the home that she lived in a decade ago with her husband, or if she's always lived there. Oh my god, we got a fucking concert now. But in any event, she is remembering the day that he disappeared and watching him that day, staring out the window into the fjord, and then he goes out on his boat and never comes back. Wow. And then 10 years has gone by, and that's all I know to the story. But the way that it's written, I was pulled in deep, really enjoying it. Don't know what else is going to happen, but I'm loving the way it's written, the way it's told. It's very different from anything I've... Well, you know, maybe I'm just going to have to give up. Now, this... Yeah, maybe I have enough energy left to move and set up some outside somewhere else, but this is too much, so stay tuned. Hey, well, this is shady for the moment and quieter. Oh, take my mask off. So yeah, the Fosse, I don't know why it's called Alice at the Fire. I don't think there's a character named Alice. Anyway, it's starting out really good, and it'll be a quick read, and because the writing is so experimental, there's got to be a better word than that. 20 pages a week. Letting it percolate for a week before I pick it up again, that's perfect. Slow reading, people. I've been picking up, amidst all my bails, I've been picking up new releases a lot. Even if it was for Old Middlebrow, it's a new release to me. It's a reprint of a book from whenever. But so I decided that I needed to get some backlists, some books that have been sitting on my shelf for a while that are not trendy, that aren't booktube darling, just books that I want to read that for other reasons. So I'm so glad I did that, because on my exercise bike, I have started Revolutionary Road by Richard Yates. I guess there was a movie with some Leonardo da Vinci or something. Didn't see it, but keep hearing that this is an amazing novel. So I started it. Because it's my exercise book. In 2 days, I'm 70 pages in, which is a lot for Sean the Book Maniac when you're reading 20 books at once. It's good. It's so good. I don't want to read too many novels that are set in 1960s middle-class families in the suburbs. My feeling about that is the way a lot of readers object to reading so much World War II fiction, which I don't get at all. There's not enough of it as far as I'm concerned. But middle-class family dramas, I'm very selective, and this one is one of the select few, I think, that I will ever bother reading, and it is amazing. So it opens with a community theater performance that goes completely awry in a comic way. It's not predominantly comic in tone, but enough comedy in it that it's quite wonderful, the way they've been practicing, and then the lead actor is sick, and so the director stands in, and he's not of the right age or the body type or appearance to be appealing as the leading man, and that's the leading woman. She and her husband end up being the main characters of the novel, and she is really talented, but because everybody else around her in this opening night performance are completely fumbling their lines and their walk-ins and everything's thrown off key, she ends up doing a terrible job too, and that's the opening scene of the novel. And then we focus on her and her husband. And it's not a very happy marriage. It's just really well done. So far, I'm loving it. When was it published? 1961. And finally, I have started the second volume in a projected trilogy of novels by the gay British writer Adam Mars Jones, Sedila. The first volume was called Pilcrow, and this is Sedila. And it's about a young man who, because of the Still's disease, it took years for them to diagnose it. In some ways it reads like a memoir, but it's not. It's very fictionalized. It's not based on anything autobiographical in the author's life, but it's a deeply detailed story of a young man who gets Still's disease, which is a kind of rheumatoid arthritis and is especially severe when it's juvenile onset, that leaves him severely disabled and in volume 1, Pilcrow, in an institution for years and years and years. And then he comes out to himself in his teenage years and actually explores his sexuality in this institution. Well, he's moved to a boarding school for disabled kids, and that's where he explores his sexuality. Just a beautiful 500-page book. I've said this, whenever I talk about this book, I say, I thought it was too long at the time, and I read it 4 years ago, before I came to BookTube, and it has really stuck with me. I think about it at least once a week, so it wasn't too long, because John Cromer, he is bedridden in an institution for years, so not a lot happens except what happens in his head. And a part of reader me resisted the fact that there was so little happening. The more distance I have from that book, the more I realized that was the point, and I have never experienced what that would be like as intensely as I did in that book. So that book has left a marvelous aftertaste. So I finally started Sedila, Volume 2. Mars Jones has not yet produced Volume 3, and maybe he won't, I don't know. He's now taking Hilary Mantel's role. We're all waiting, but Sedila is starting out really good. So in Sedila, he has finished at the boarding school, and the doctors have determined that he's stopped growing enough that they want to repair his hip, because his hip is so malformed from the disease and being, I guess, bedridden, that he's not able to sit up properly. He's kind of sitting in a twisted way, and they wanted to wait until he had fully grown before they did it. And then I'm just in the early pages of the book, so I'm not going to tell you anything in as much detail as this because it's at the very beginning, but the poor guy, they made a mistake with the anesthesia, and it almost closed his throat up, and so they had to stop the operation, and he woke up thinking that his hip would be fixed, but in fact they hadn't done the operation because they fucked up the anesthesia. We're talking like 1960s here. Didn't have it the right size, the tube for a child. And the way he explains it so beautifully, it's heartbreaking. And I mean, this is not a sentimental book. He is acerbic, and it's a first-person narrative, and John is not sentimental at all. So it made my heart break that he said, they didn't think about the fact that I was still a child because I talk like an adult, and it just didn't click in their minds, and so they shoved this thing down his throat, and it was too big for his adolescent, and it just fucked everything up, and he woke up with his throat hurting. He didn't know what was going on, and that's where I'm at this story. It's a unique story and an important one, and I'm glad to finally have gotten to Volume 2. So that's what I've started. Woo! So that's one of my exercise bike books, along with the Revolutionary Road. In terms of what I'll be starting, I'm going to start trying to get, and not start one for every one I finish, so I'm expecting to finish at least 2. So my goal is for every 2 I finish, I can start 1. Bargaining with the universe. So I think the one that I'll start this coming week, provided I do finish 2, is this new release from Ireland, The Sound Mirror by Heidi James. It just came out like about a month ago, and I don't know much about it other than it's been getting rave reviews. This is her 3rd novel, and I believe it's published by the same publishers, British publishers from West Yorkshire, Blue Moose Books, that published Ronan Hession's Leonard and Hungry Paul. And just been hearing really good stuff about it. The opening sentence of the synopsis on the inside flap: Tamara is going to kill her mother, but she isn't the villain. Interesting. Very tiny, tiny print. I'm looking forward to giving it a try. That is all I plan to possibly start in the coming week, but, stay tuned. Hey, well, I was almost finished editing the video and I realized I forgot one more that I'll be starting next week. And that is the new Akweke Emeze novel, The Death of Vivek Oji. This will be a buddy read of Lindsay's book life. We're going to read this over about a month, and I will start the first chunk of it, I think 6 chapters a week. So I will start reading this next week for my first check-in with her the following week. She and I both absolutely loved Emeze's debut, Freshwater. It will be my first ever buddy read with Lindsay. I'm very much looking forward to it. Thank you for watching.